today is not going to be the exception. We have three challenges, and we have an amazing guest, a real expert in the industry. And today we're going to talk about proactiveness. What is being proactive in customer success? Why is it so important? What role does management plays when it comes to a proactive mindset for the team? So those and other challenges we're going to talk about today. But first, Nav, I'm wondering, do you think that proactive is a skill that people learn and develop, or it's something that is individual and we're born with that?
It's a great question, Baron. I think it's a bit of both. It's definitely something that gets better with experience and is learned over time because
Yeah.
proactivity is really dependent on the situation that you're in, and the more you see those situations, the better you get at seeing the early signs and being a bit more proactive. So, if I had to pick one, I'd say it's definitely more learned than it is natural.
Nice. That's good. That's amazing. And like you said, it comes with time. A lot of things in life and in customer success, it comes with time. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And today's guest has 10 years of experience in customer success. Isn't that amazing? Not only 10 years in customer success, but has worked in different industries, IT, education, and fintech as well. He's currently leading a team of customer success professionals. So he's been part of that proactive side of guiding the team into being proactive instead of reactive. Although reactive, it is important in customer success, we are more into the proactive side. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Today's guest is Akshat Mathur. Thank you so much for being here, Akshat.
Thanks, Baron, for having me. Looking forward to the conversations and thanks for the warm welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And Nav, you will want to have the honor to introduce the first challenge of the day.
Absolutely. So I think the first challenge, actually, is that we all know we always hear proactiveness in customer success, and everyone needs to be proactive. And on paper, it always makes sense, but in practice, it's a little bit harder to actually do it. So maybe let's start with how would you define proactiveness, and what do you think there might be some misunderstandings or misconceptions around it?
That's a great way to start now with the definition. And we can talk about proactiveness in the context of customer success. Very simply put, it's a mindset of anticipating what's important for a customer and what proactiveness is for them as per their KPIs and as per their working model. So it's about having a finger on the pulse of your customers to know how would they react in a certain situation. For example, if you talk about the IT ecosystem, if we have an API downtime of 1 hour, which might have an impact for them for, let's say, X thousand dollars, how would they react in that way, and how can you de-escalate things faster? How can you catch and deter those situations from happening in the future? This is the mindset which is built within customer success. And that's something which has to be honed over time, like you touched upon in your introduction, that it's a skill which gets better with time. It's a mindset for customer success to anticipate those moments and see how they can add value in the overall relationship with the customers. Now, one simple example in the recent context, we all talk about AI and ChatGPT. So a customer success might say what offering that their company might have, having a conversation with the customers and see if they could extend some services which could have those implications, and they can have certain sort of value addition for them, and see what maybe just offering that as something which is like a pilot, and see if they're interested in that. Even if the answer is no, at least the customer is sure that, okay, this person out there is looking out for me, is keeping me up to date with the latest trends, and see what's there in the market to have their competitive edge maintained with the competitors. So it's a mindset overall, which I feel is built over time. It's something which can be honed internally as well from a corporate realm, and it can be further improved from there on.
I think you mentioned the KPI piece, and I think the reality is that you can't really manage what you don't measure. And when you think about, I guess, being proactive from, I guess, my perspective, and I love what you were saying about, sort of the impact and the ways that you can do this. When I look at my team and the way that I manage my team, they've got these KPIs that are built that align to what the customer needs and what the company needs. And then tracking that with leading indicators across, the month or the quarter, or, whatever your period you're working across, to really drive that on a daily basis. So you're not getting to a point where you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to not be able to retain so much, or I retained, but it's at the detriment of the customer's experience, or whatever it is, right? So I think it's really important to measure it, to be able to manage it. And then you sort of talked about what some of the ways that you would do it. And this might be, maybe simplifying a little bit, but I guess when we talk about proactiveness, and obviously with the idea of KPIing it for the company's good and the customer's good, what is the impact that we expect to see from being proactive in that way for both the company and the customers?
That's a great one, Nav. So if you talk about the CSM role, what sits at the center of it is how much accountability you're able to build for your customer and how much value you're adding to the overall relationship. Being very honest, these are professional relationships that are based from completely on contracts, and they could have a certain period and expiry to it. For you to have the position where you can have your customers look beyond those certain expensive services that you're offering, or maybe not as good, which might not be as good as compared to the competitor that you might have, but they are just retained because of the quality of the service you've offered to them for the last 1 year or 2 years, and how much you look out for them when it comes to the downtimes, and how much you can be transparent and proactive in those sense. So in a nutshell, it's about how much value you're able to generate in the relationship, how much accountability you're able to build, and how much you're able to position your personal brand. That's also really important. When we talk about proactiveness, when you are taking out time for one of your customers, looking out for the latest trends, looking at the data of their usage, and going back to them with certain insights, this positions you uniquely and your personal brand in the minds of the customer that, hey, we have this person who's there for us. We don't have to rely only on our internal teams, but we have our service providers, which might be the CSM's company, who is also doing their own digging and analysis and will come back to us with certain valuable insights, which will position us uniquely and distinctly for our customers. So having that confidence and having that assurance coming in from the CSM, this is what is directly related and basically an output for being proactive in that sense. So for a CSM, it's really important that they break the monotony of their regular chores, regular work for the customers, and they look beyond that and see what more I can add as a value, which would make the customers stick with the company for long term.
And customers are used as well of proactiveness, because we are never the only customer success managers that they have. And actually, if you are proactive and they are able to see that, you're not going to only bring all of that value or the positive impact that you're mentioning, but also you're going to highlight over the other customer success managers. And that's going to help in so many ways. Actually, I will say that proactiveness is, if you grab a box and you start adding all these soft skills that customer success managers would need to have, proactiveness is one of them. So I definitely agree. But a challenge that we go through when it comes to proactiveness is actually being too reactive. Like, we need a balance of proactive versus reactive in customer success. Actually, just give me a minute, because I would recommend everyone who's starting, or even who has years of experience in customer success, to read this book. Here it mentions a formula that says that customer success managers should be 80% proactive and 20% reactive. Now, of course, that depends a lot on your environment, but I like that formula. And sometimes it's so hard to get out of the reactive mindset. So I'm wondering, what do you think are the initial triggers or moments that a customer success manager should actually shift from reactive to proactive? What happens? What flags? What scenarios could tell a customer success manager, okay, you need to be proactive instead of reactive right now?
So I think there are many drivers, but I think the biggest one, which is the biggest indicator in my mind, when the CSM should really reassess their proactiveness strategy, is to understand that the relationship with the customer is becoming too transactional, where you're
Mm,
just getting onto the meetings, getting onto the business reviews, and you're just talking about uh, the work, the presentation, and you're just going off the meeting, and there's nothing beyond that. uh, those are the most delicate relationships to manage, where they're just hanging by a thread. If the next moment they feel the service is better, they would switch, or
mm,
they would have an impact on renewals insurance. Also, if the CSMs are seeing that the account growth is suffering, even when they have given impeccable service, what was within the contract, but
mhm,
the account is not growing, maybe there's something which need to catalyze that or just amplify the whole relationship, and that can be done by giving them some sort of new insights and some sort of new behavior that they are seeing in the market, which might be beneficial for them. Also, the daily tasks for the CSMs are looking quite similar. If that's also happening, it's also a big indicator that you're not doing something above and beyond, which might benefit your customers. So I think those are the few quick tips I would say, which are some good indicators for the CSM to see how to break the monotony. And uh, there's this also, just to tying it with one misconception which is very prevalent in the CS industry, is support is normally seen as customer success, because if you see a lot of people who are entering the CSM spaces, they come from support background, which could be phone support, could be chat support, could be in-person support. And those support centers are mostly reactive. They make you entirely reactive because the KPI there is the customer would reach out to you with queries, with certain sort of questions, and then you would solve it. But here, the model is completely different. If you want to be proactive, you have to proactively look out for those indicators and see, okay, if this is an issue, what more I can do to make sure that these issues do not occur in the future? Or if the issue has happened, how soon I can fix it much faster within the SLA. So I think breaking that monotony is also really important on the individual level and at the corporate level as well.
yeah. Yep. I think that the industry is changing as the days pass, and now companies are understanding a little bit what is customer success. Although there's a big still way to make that as it should, and there are companies that have customer success, but they don't understand the value, and they don't understand what is a customer success framework, which is a lot. And some companies, just like you said, they use the name customer success as a fancy name for support. And if you are new in this industry, you think that you're doing customer success, but actually you're in another department. You're wasting maybe your skills. So that happens a lot. But I wanted to know what questions, maybe top three questions that you should ask yourself to be proactive. Is it like that, or is how would you like what questions should you ask yourself to start that proactive mindset?
That's a really good question, Baron. So I think one question at the corporate level that the leaders should be asking is, are they defining the why, the importance of being proactive to their customer success well enough? I see this a lot of times that a lot of CSMs, they strive and they really hustle towards being proactive, looking out for measures, looking out for tools that can make them proactive, and having certain sort of alert set and many other things. But they don't know why this is important for that customer to know things sooner. And this is different for all customers. You cannot simply replicate the formula from one customer to the another, because let's say if you have one customer for whom, if you pick up an issue, if they report an issue, and if you're able to solve it within 2 days, they're happy. But for the other customer, 2 days is too much. They want things solved within 2 hours. Same goes for let's say business reviews. I've had certain customers who would love to get the business reviews done on a monthly basis, and those insights are extremely valuable for them. But for the others, you keep sending them the decks and they won't even open it. So you have to think of some other formulas, like taking them out on coffee, having a conversation with them, and then getting to the conversations about renewals and just touching upon those things which you would otherwise at the end of the business review. So I think reassessment of these things are really important, and they have to really be sensitized by the leadership to the customer success to define the why very well. I think other question is, which they need to constantly ask, that what's the wiggle room that they have for each customer. If you have lost the trust, if you have lost a moment for them to be proactive or to prove to yourself to be proactive, what more you can do, because the battle is not lost there. It's some, you have many opportunities and you can do so much more for your customers, in a long run. So the question to ask yourself is, what are more opportunities that I can create for myself? Because I've been missing on this opportunity. They have been reporting issues to us rather than the other way around. And what more I can add as a value where I can still regain their trust, and the relationship can be long lasting. So I think it's more of an intrinsic motivation, I feel, rather than extrinsic. You have to think from within. Uh, understanding of the based on your understanding of the customer, that what's important for them, why is it important for them. I think these are the very basic and fundamental questions which have to be defined from the top level of the company.
I like that you mentioned the business reviews because one of the things that I like to use to test out whether a CS team is being proactive or not is to just get sort of a ballpark idea around how many business reviews have customer decision makers attending on a regular basis. And about 9 out of 10 times, the reality is that they're just not. They're very much disengaged. And the reason for that, more often than not, is that we're going there and talking about stuff that is by design reactive. And going in there, we're talking about usage. We're talking about support tickets. We're talking about all of these things that are us reacting to what is happening in the now. Whereas an executive or a decision maker in a business review is coming in there to talk about how we're going to help them in the future. And so if we can't bridge that gap for an executive or decision maker on the customer side, that's when you start to see it, sort of fall in terms of how many times you've got decision makers actually showing up. So when we look at the actual metric, we've got business reviews happening left and right all the time, but it isn't actually driving anything out of that. And the reason for that is because we're not actually thinking proactively for the customer as well. And so there's this, mentality of what does it actually mean to be proactive? And I think there's a lot of different ways you can bring that to the role of a CSM, especially in sort of every activity that you do. Some are going to be naturally reactive because if you're working with a project manager on that side, yes, you're going to have to talk about the now and where, things are at this stage. But there are so many times where you have to pivot to think about what is in it for them for the future, and then be able to drive that vision forward for them.
Couldn't agree more now. I think just to add to the question that the CSM should ask themselves, is also how should they brand their proactive effort. It's also a very important question for the CSMs to know. For example, if they are in the industry where proactiveness is a necessity, it's something which the customers are demanding from every single competition of yours in the market. So there you can't really talk about proactiveness as a unique skill. It is a basic requirement for your job, so you have to keep that in mind. On the other hand, you have certain industries which are more relationship driven, where, for example, you're having some corporate partnerships, or you're writing some case studies, or having some in-kind partnerships or collaborations. Their proactiveness is an add-on, where because it's a slow-moving industry where you're being proactive, that really stands out. So it is really important to understand how are you branding your efforts of proactiveness and not selling it as a USP in front of your customers.
Another challenge that customer success we go through when it comes to proactive is actually getting out of that personal comfort zone of being reactive. Sometimes being reactive is just too much time consuming, and then you start being reactive, and then you start, like, time passes, and when you notice, your day is over, and then you have to wait for the next day. But you're always in that maybe comfort zone of being reactive instead of changing to the proactive side of stuff. Is there any way to break out from that comfort zone? Is there any way to to know that we are in that reactive period, and instead of being proactive?
Well, that's actually one of the biggest problems for the CS leadership to solve a lot of times, to get their teams to be acting more proactive rather than reactive. And a lot of the times you end up finding that the reason is not only the individual's perspective or mindset towards the work, but it is because of their busyness in the schedule, because they have like multiple customers to handle, uh, multiple things coming in at the same time. If they have like peak seasons, they have no time to be proactive at all. So a lot of the times it's a business problem as well because of the workload they have on the CSMs. On the other hand, of course, it's the individual's mindset as well, because it's a bubble. It makes you really comfortable. to do these one, two, three things, and that's it. Call it a day. I think one very simple way to solve it is to block your time either once a week or once a day or once a month, whatever works the best for your industry. To sit down and assess the account and see what more are the opportunities. If I talk about these insights with my customers, they would be happy. Because a lot of time what happens is you might feel that the customers are not really caring about not having a proactive return from you, but because I've had a couple of customers who actually don't really raise an issue when they find that the CSM is not being prompt, as prompt as they want them to be, but they maintain a tracker of such instances for leveraging it in the commercial conversations that we have with them at the end of the contract, and they negotiate the prices based on that. So it's not something which is ignored by the customers also. It's something which is not only a necessity for a personal level, but for the corporate level as well. And how could that be broken? It's just by a quick reassessment of uh, just to have a growth mindset. We talk about strategic thinking as well. I think one of the big factors for that is proactiveness, where you are proactively looking out for things and then you're looking for some patterns. Based on that, you're designing a strategy for that particular customer. Okay, this customer, I think their preference in the last quarter has been, let's say, this market or this service. Let's see how we can enhance this further. And of course, they will probably that will make them forget about some of the other, not so good things you have done in the other services or other markets. So having that mindset for them, and it's a constant test. There is no right or wrong way to do it. It's a constant test or strategy with the customer to see what sticks, what works best for them. If they're happy with the strategy, you continue doing it and you make it better. So I think having those conversations, and of course, that also creates an excitement in the role of a CSM as well to break the monotony and break the bubble, which is also really important for their growth journey as well in the CS industry.
It's actually interesting that this is a problem if you think about it, because the reactive approach to a CSM's job is usually having to deal with difficult conversations, which is something that nobody wants to do. So being proactive actually avoids that. So it's an interesting, sort of catch-22, right? I mean, you want to step out of your comfort zone to be proactive, or you leave it long enough that you have to step out of your comfort zone to have conflicting conversations. So maybe it's better to be proactive, right?
I agree. And in fact, one of the big risks that you also run into, just taking away the thought where just now just touched upon, is it might make you look like you don't know about the product in detail if you're not being proactive. Like if you are not giving those reassurances to your customer that okay, we will work on this within this timeline and we'll make sure that we'll give you a better experience the next time. And if they are probably nudging you for certain things and you're not being able to react in a certain way, it might make you look like you don't know about the product too well, and that is always a big risk for any customer to run into. And one of the big reasons why I believe proactive approaches should be endorsed more than it does is it really helps to de-escalate the issues a lot. Like we have big issues coming up or big breakdowns that happen for the customers, and if they're reporting it and if you're not being proactive at that moment, if you're not
Like
present
a
for them at
safety
that
net.
moment, not giving those reassurances, it might escalate the issue much faster. So proactive approach really helps to de-escalate as well.
You were mentioning that with being proactive plus data helps you to predict as well, and that's just what you're touching about right now, like that safety net of being proactive, which is part of being predict the future of a customer interaction. And you mentioned something really important here, which is a tool that customer success we can use on our daily basis, which is actually blocking parts of your day or your week for being reactive, right? Is there any specific amount of hours per day that you will suggest customer success to block their time? Or what would you suggest to your team members?
I think this all depends on having an understanding of the customer's KPI, what's important for them, and what are the things that they are being measured on, to their end users or to their clients. Um, I think if the KPIs are, let's say, 6 or 7, like they have, few considerations for the customers, and that's something which would take, let's say, 2 hours or 3 hours a day or a week, then you define your strategy based on that. So, for me, the basic fundamental to sit down and demonstrate proactiveness is to base the strategy based on the customer's KPI, and make sure that you have those things covered first. Secondly, of course, there are certain tools that you can use to have the alerts set or make sure that you demonstrate proactiveness internally too. Let's say if you have a technical issue or an operational issue, the company has a culture where internal teams are being transparent and proactive to report things to the CSMs as well, so they can better present that to the customers. Rather than the customer coming to you and saying, "Hey, we have got this issue. Can you please check with your technical team and the operations team?" I think it's a culture which is quite intrinsic, as I touched upon earlier. It has to be built internally from the management as a culture of the company, so that you have each team who is being proactive to the another, so that they can better deal with the external stakeholders. Um, and of course, like blocking some time and these strategies always work. But I believe the bigger narrative here is to base your strategy based on the KPIs which are important for your customers. And if you go and reach out to them, which helps them serve their customers or end users better, they wouldn't be more, they wouldn't be.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for all of those tips. And we have touched a lot on what to do, what, why, the impact, how it works, what is that about. But let's not forget what not to do. So it's time to start wrapping up today's episode. Um, like I always say, I wish we could spend more time and touch more on other topics, but we touch on the main challenges when it comes to being proactive in customer success. But I want to end the episode with what not to do, as in when it comes to being proactive. Is there any specific top three maybe not to
Yeah,
do's?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is proactiveness is often confused with an initial reaction that, okay, we hear you, but maybe that's not what a customer wants. They want a solution. So it is important to understand from the customer, what sort of proactive approaches would work the best with them. Sometimes the acknowledgements, suffice that, okay, we've heard you. Let us come back to you within the SLA agreed as per the contract. Sometimes it doesn't work. I think more often than not, it doesn't work. They want a solution, a response. So proactiveness there is the quality of response rather than reaction. So I think that's a really important thing for CSMs to understand for each customer of theirs, what strategy works the best for them, and talk that language with them. Secondly, I feel proactiveness is not always a top-down approach. It's not something where you have to, start cultivating this practice from the top level and it trickles down. A lot of times I've seen that these strategies do not really work because the people who are the closest and they talk the most to the customers are the ones which are somewhere from the middle to the bottom of the base of the pyramid. They are the ones, the support teams, the CSMs, and the operations team and the technical team who are more in constant touch point with the customers. So building and cultivating the proactiveness there is really, really important. And this directly also should be a parameter while hiring the CSM, to make sure that the person you're hiring has he or she demonstrated proactiveness in the previous roles and how they've learned and what's their perspective on it. So I think these are the couple of things which I believe are the basic things which, if we get them right, we should be able to cultivate this culture. And one more thing which I keep telling a lot of CSMs is, the battle is never lost. If you have missed an opportunity once, you will get many more opportunities in the future with the customer to build that trust again and build that accountability again. You just have to think of more creative ways of doing it, and that's what positions your personal brand in the customer's mind as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. The tenacity of a CSM is a lot better than being, beat down and then just walking away from it, right? I'd rather, especially in the legal industry, lawyers tend to have emotions running high often, and there are times when somebody who's really happy next day can be really, really, pissed, angry, and the reason for that is because of the day that they've had, and walking away from that, not just being able to get through all of that and just really get to the point of what they're trying to say, and then driving the results that they need, really turns them around 180 every single time. And I've seen this happen time and time again, where the CSMs that really stick to it and really keep driving the results for the customer are the ones that outshine everybody else.
I agree now. And I think one more thing that companies often see proactiveness as in order for it to make a standard practice, they try to reward it too much, making it look like a good to have or an outlier within the team. But ideally, for the customers, what they demand is proactiveness across the board. And this is something which, in order for this to be a common practice, you can only reward something so much. So I think it has to be cultivated from the internal teams and see how this can be honed and made better with some examples and some real use case scenarios for the customers and going further from there in terms of the relationship with the customer.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I mean, everyone wants to work with a proactive person. Any leader wants to have a proactive member in their team. Any customer would like to have a customer success manager with a proactive mindset. So this is it for today's episode. Um, the book that I was mentioning, because I show it, but I did not set the name for the people listening in Spotify or Apple Podcasts, is the Customer Success Professional Handbook. Totally recommend it. It explains a lot of what is customer success. And just keep in mind that being proactive is positive, it's always good, but also keep in mind like what Akshat and Nav mentioned before. What impact would it bring? All the proactive work that you're doing, is it actually aiming to what you want and the company want and the customer want, right? So keep in mind the KPIs as well. Keep in mind the success plan that you develop together with the customer, to make sure that the time that you invest is actually worth. Thank you so much, Akshat, for your time. Nav, thank you so much for being here. As usual, working with you is a pleasure. And we are in Spotify as well, but we are now on YouTube. So you can see us and you can listen to us. So feel free to always subscribe. And yeah, no more. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Baron. Thank you so much, Akshat.
Thank
Great
you.
chat.
Thanks for having me.
Bye bye.